2 Kings 23. Then the king sent, and they gathered to him all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. And the king went up to the house of Yahweh, and all the men of Judah, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets, and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant which was found in the house of Yahweh. Then the king stood by the pillar, and cut a covenant before Yahweh, to walk after Yahweh, and to keep his commandments, and his testimonies, and his statutes with all his heart and all his soul, to establish the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people entered into the covenant. Then the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest, and the priests of the second order, and the doorkeepers, to bring out of the temple of Yahweh all the vessels that were made for Baal, for Asherah, and for all the host of heaven. And he burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of the Kidron, and carried their ashes to Bethel. And he did away with the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had appointed, and who burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah and in the surrounding area of Jerusalem, as well as those who burned incense to Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the constellations, and to all the host of heaven. And he brought out the Asherah from the house of Yahweh outside Jerusalem to the brook Kidron, and burned it at the brook Kidron, and ground it to dust, and threw its dust on the graves of the common people. He also tore down the houses of the male cult prostitutes which were in the house of Yahweh, where the women were weaving hangings for the Asherah. Then he brought all the priests from the cities of Judah, and defiled the high places where the priests had burned incense, from Geba to Beersheba. And he tore down the high places of the gates which were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua the ruler of the city, which were on one's left at the city gate. Nevertheless, the priests of the high places did not go up to the altar of Yahweh in Jerusalem, but they ate unleavened bread among their brothers. He also defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter pass through the fire for Moloch. And he did away with the horses which the kings of Judah had given to the sun, at the entrance of the house of Yahweh, by the chamber of Nathan-Melech, the official, which was in the precincts, and he burned the chariots of the sun with fire. Also, the altars which were on the roof, the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the kings of Judah had made, and the altars which Manasseh had made in the two courts of the house of Yahweh, the king tore down, and he crushed them there, and threw their dust into the brook Kidron. And the high places which were before Jerusalem, which were on the right of the mount of destruction, which Solomon the king of Israel had built for Ashtoreth, the detestable idol of the Sidonians, and for Chemosh, the detestable idol of Moab, and for Milcom, the abomination of the sons of Ammon, the king defiled. And he broke in pieces the sacred pillars, and cut down the Asherim, and filled their places with human bones. Furthermore, the altar that was at Bethel, in the high place which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel sin, had made, even that altar and the high place he tore down. Then he demolished its stones, ground them to dust, and burned the Asherah. Then Josiah turned, and he saw the graves that were there on the mountain. And he sent and took the bones from the graves, and burned them on the altar, and defiled it according to the word of Yahweh which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these things. Then he said, What is this monument that I see? And the men of the city told him, It is the grave of the man of God who came from Judah, and proclaimed these things which you have done against the altar of Bethel. And he said, Let him alone, let no one move his bones. So they left his bones undisturbed, with the bones of the prophet who came from Samaria. And also all the houses of the high places which were in the cities of Samaria, which the kings of Israel had made, provoking Yahweh to anger, Josiah removed, and he did to them just as he had done in Bethel. And all the priests of the high places who were there he slaughtered on the altars, and burned human bones on them. Then he returned to Jerusalem. Then the king commanded all the people, saying, Celebrate the Passover to Yahweh your God, as it is written in this book of the covenant. For such a Passover had not been celebrated from the days of the judges who judged Israel, nor in all the days of the kings of Israel and of the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, this Passover was celebrated to Yahweh in Jerusalem. Moreover, the mediums and the spiritists and the teraphim and the idols and all the detestable things that were seen in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem, Josiah purged in order that he might establish the words of the law which were written in the book that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of Yahweh. And before him there was no king like him, who turned to Yahweh with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, nor did any like him arise after him. However, Yahweh did not turn from his great burning anger, his anger which burned against Judah, because of all the provocations with which Manasseh had provoked him to anger. And Yahweh said, I will remove Judah also from my presence, as I have removed Israel. And I will reject Jerusalem, this city which I have chosen, and the house of which I said, My name shall be there. Now the rest of the acts of Josiah, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? In his days Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up to the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates, and King Josiah went to meet him. And when Pharaoh Necho saw him, he put him to death at Megiddo. And his servants drove his body in a chariot from Megiddo, and brought him to Jerusalem, and buried him in his own tomb. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz the son of Josiah, and anointed him, and made him king in place of his father. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that his fathers had done. And Pharaoh Necho imprisoned him at Riblah in the land of Hamath, that he might not reign in Jerusalem. And he imposed on the land a fine of 100 talents of silver and 1 talent of gold. Then Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim the son of Josiah king in the place of Josiah his father, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. But he took Jehoahaz and brought him to Egypt, and he died there. So Jehoiakim gave the silver and gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land in order to give the money at the command of Pharaoh. He exacted the silver and gold from the people of the land, each according to his valuation, and gave it to Pharaoh Necho. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Zebedah, the daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah. And he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that his fathers had done. Hebrews 5. For every high priest taken from among men is appointed on behalf of men in things pertaining to God, in order to offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins, being able to deal gently with the ignorant and misguided, since he himself also is beset with weakness. And because of it he is obligated, just as for the people, to also offer sacrifices for sins in the same way for himself. And no one takes this honor to himself, but receives it when he is called by God, even as Aaron was. In this way also Christ did not glorify himself to become a high priest, but he who said to him, You are my son, today I have begotten you. Just as he says also in another passage, You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. He, in the days of his flesh, offered up both prayers and supplications with loud crying and tears to the one able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things which he suffered. And having been made perfect, he became to all those who obey him the source of eternal salvation, being designated by God as a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Concerning him we have much to say, and it is hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you have need again for someone to teach you the elementary principles of the oracles of God, and you have come to need milk and not solid food. For everyone who partakes only of milk is not accustomed to the word of righteousness, for he is an infant. But solid food is for the mature, who because of practice have their senses trained to discern both good and evil. Joel 2. Blow a trumpet in Zion, and make a loud shout on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of Yahweh is coming. Surely it is near. a day of darkness and thick darkness, a day of clouds and dense gloom. As the dawn is spread over the mountains, so there is a numerous and mighty people. There has never been anything like it, nor will there be again after it for the years from generation to generation. A fire consumes before them, and behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them, but a desolate wilderness behind them, and nothing at all escapes them. Their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and like war horses so they run. With a noise as of chariots they leap on the tops of the mountains. Like the crackling of a flame of fire consumes the stubble, like a mighty people arranged for battle. Before them the peoples are writhing, all faces turn pale. They run like mighty men, they climb up the wall like men of war, and they each march in line. And they do not deviate from their paths, they do not crowd each other. They march every one in his path. When they fall against the defending weapons, they do not break ranks. They rush on the city, they run on the wall. They climb up into the houses. They enter through the windows like a thief. Before them the earth trembles, the heavens quake. The sun and the moon grow dark, and the stars lose their brightness. But Yahweh gives forth his voice before his military force. Surely his camp is very numerous, for mighty is he who does his word. The day of Yahweh is indeed great and very awesome, and who can endure it? Yet even now, declares Yahweh, return to me with all your heart, and with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and tear your heart and not your garments. Now return to Yahweh your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness, and relenting concerning evil. Who knows whether he will not turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him, even a grain offering and a drink offering for Yahweh your God? Blow a trumpet in Zion, set apart a fast as holy, call for a solemn assembly. Gather the people, set apart the congregation as holy. Assemble the elders, gather the infants and the nursing babies. Let the bridegroom come out of his room and the bride out of her bridal chamber. Let the priests, the ministers of Yahweh, weep between the porch and the altar, and let them say, Pity your people, O Yahweh, and do not make your inheritance a reproach, a byword among the nations. Why should they among the people say, Where is their God? Then Yahweh will be zealous for his land and will spare his people. Then Yahweh will answer and say to his people, Behold, I am going to send you grain, new wine, and oil, and you will be satisfied in full with them. And I will never again make you a reproach among the nations. But I will remove the northern military force far from you, and I will drive it into a parched and desolate land, and its vanguard into the eastern sea, and its rear guard into the western sea. And its stench will rise up, and its foul smell will rise up, for it has done great things. Do not fear, O land, rejoice and be glad, for Yahweh has done great things. Do not fear, beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness have turned green, for the tree has borne its fruit. The fig tree and the vine have yielded their full force. So rejoice, O sons of Zion, and be glad in Yahweh your God, for he has given you the early rain in righteousness, and he has poured down for you the rain, the early and late rains as before. The threshing floors will be full of grain, and the vats will overflow with new wine and oil. Then I will pay back to you in full for the years that the swarming locust has consumed, the creeping locust, the stripping locust, and the gnawing locust, my great military force which I sent among you. And you will have plenty to consume and be satisfied, and praise the name of Yahweh your God, who has dealt wondrously with you. Then my people will never be put to shame. Thus you will know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am Yahweh your God, and there is no other, and my people will never be put to shame. And it will be afterwards that I will pour out my Spirit on all mankind, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, your young men will see visions. Even on the male slaves and the female slaves I will in those days pour out my Spirit. And I will put wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and awesome day of Yahweh comes. And it will be that everyone who calls on the name of Yahweh will be delivered. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be those who escape, as Yahweh has said, even among the survivors whom Yahweh calls. Psalm 142, a maskil of David when he was in the cave, a prayer. With my voice to Yahweh I cry aloud. With my voice to Yahweh I make supplication. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my distress before him. When my spirit was faint within me, you knew my path. In the way where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see that there is no one who regards me. A way of escape has been destroyed from me. No one cares for my soul. I cried out to you, O Yahweh. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give heed to my cry of lamentation, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring my soul out of prison, to give thanks to your name. The righteous will encircle me, for you will deal bountifully with me.